Hi, this is Richard Murray with another session of Parking Lot Theology. I want to talk to you today about a different take on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I get a lot of questions, probably as many questions about that as anything else. And I've had a lot of children ask me this, but a lot of adults too. Why did God put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden? Isn't it a good thing to be curious? Isn't it a good thing to get knowledge of both good and evil? Why would that kill us? In the day that you shall eat of that fruit, you shall die, the Lord said. And Adam did die spiritually. To the Hebrew, death meant more of a death to relationship. You became alienated. And that's exactly what happened. But so what is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? This is a different take on it. I don't think you've heard it before, but if you have, feel free in the comment section to share it and see what you think. But when we say the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we say, well, is it knowing good a thing? Yeah, isn't that a good thing to know good? Well, yes, but that's not the tree. The tree is knowing good and evil. See, this form of knowledge, whatever it is a knowledge that connects good and evil inextricably together. So that where we end up with it is everything is good and evil. God is good and evil. We are good and evil. Creation is good and evil. That's the way we orient ourselves to reality. We can just think about this. If I were to be honest, if I hung around you long enough, you would say that I was both good and evil. And on one level, I would be. I would have good and evil traits in me come out and good things come out. If you stick around long enough, you're going to see good and evil. But where does that come from? Well, I would argue that fundamentally, when we see God as good and evil, and this is the way the Old Testament saints saw him, that he was the source of both good and evil. He creates good, he creates evil, Isaiah said. And Amos said, is there evil in the city and the Lord has not done it? And Isaiah said, I the Lord, create good and evil and light and darkness and all that. So anyhow, but here's the thing. When we see God that way, we then become that way. A.W. Tozer, in one of the greatest things ever said, I think, said that we grow by a secret law of the soul to resemble our image of God. Whatever we ultimately believe God to be, we will grow to resemble that. So that, and I can trace this if we look at the Old Testament to prove that they ate from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil because they first off saw God as both good and evil. Jewish theodicy just operates that way. That's the way they believe, that God is so sovereign that everything that happens comes from his causative hand, and that everything that commands, every judgment, everything that happens on the earth is God behind it, doing it. So that they then become, as the Pharisees of Jesus' day showed, good and evil. Paul was good and evil. He was good. He was zealous for God, but he was also out murdering people, Christians. So Jesus comes in the New Testament and gives us an entirely different paradigm. He comes and says, no. This isn't the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This is the tree of life. And in this life is good and only good and always good. There is nothing else other than goodness and life in God. Don't ever say, and evil. All right. No matter what happens, whatever we see that we know intuitively is evil, it's not of God. It's just that simple. And so we see in the New Testament, whereas the Old Testament said God creates the light and the dark, the good and the evil. In the New Testament, we see in 1 John 1:5 that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. John said this was the message that if you had to summarize the gospel in one line for John, I don't think it would be John 3:16, although that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. That's a great, fantastic verse. I think he actually summarized it in 1 John 1:6 when he said, this is the message that we have heard from the beginning and now tell you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness. He was preaching a non-dualistic God, which is really the problem with that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is the tree of duality. For every good, there's evil. Those things are inextricably connected to each other. I've used this example before, but if you've ever heard of the Spanish throwing bolas, that's a Spanish weapon where there's two metal balls tied at the end of it to a strap. You twirl the strap around, you hurl it, and then it flings in the air like a helicopter and then spins around somebody, and then as it spins closer and closer, entwining them, that the metal balls hit them in the head and knock out the victim. That's exactly what the knowledge of good and evil is. It's not good without evil, it's good and evil. So anyhow, I hope that opens up some new thinking for us, and that we can maybe talk about this again, but to see that that the knowledge of good and evil And let me mention one other thing before we close. If you look at the effects of the knowledge of good and evil, what effects did it have? It totally devastated Adam. He became a fearmonger. He hid from God. He was scared of God. He thought God was going to come down on him. He tried to disguise, hide behind fig leaves. He then blamed. They both became blame shifters. Adam blamed Eve. It was the woman you gave me, God. Adam blamed both of them. And Eve said it was a serpent. She was blaming the devil. All right, so you see the loss of character that they both endured because they changed their paradigm. They were walking with God in the beauty of the garden, in the silence and the beauty of the garden. And seeing him as only light and the source of life. But when that changed, their perspective changed, they immediately became fearful. They became cripplingly self-conscious, all right, ashamed of their nudity, and then they became blame shifters. So, and in that sense, they died to God. Their spirits died. They became alienated in their understanding, Ephesians says. So anyway, I hope that blesses you and helps you resolve that the knowledge of good and evil is not a righteous and blessed thing to eat from. It is the thing to stay away from. The God we serve is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Thanks.